Hello and welcome to The Secret of My Success, the podcast and YouTube channel where we explore what it means to live a fulfilling life. I am your host, Erin Curran. Thank you so much for joining us today. So today, my guest is Julietta Wenzel. She is somebody that I have known for several years. Funny story, I actually met her when I sliced my wrist open with the bottom of a coffee cup. I tend to be a klutz. I tripped in a parking lot. And as I was going through the recovery process, I was looking for a physical therapist who was more holistic about the aspect. And I had the absolute pleasure of stumbling across her. And the funny thing is, she knew like 5 or 6 people that I already knew. So, small world. Julietta also has a podcast. It's called Voices of the Goddess. Maybe she'll talk with us a little bit about that today. And yeah, Julietta, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored to be here.
Well, I actually was a guest on your podcast a couple of years ago when I
Yes.
finished my book. One of our mutual friends had suggested that I reach out to you, and it was just so much fun because you were at the time really creating a space for women who were kind of in a particular vein, personal development, spiritual growth. And I really loved what you guys were doing at the time. And it's fun to see how much you've grown.
Yeah, it has definitely been a journey. The podcast started kind of out of the pandemic. Like, what do we do and how can we? It was someone that's in a BNI with me. And for those who don't know out there, BNI stands for Business Networking International. And so it's a closed networking group. And, we help each other grow each other's business. And so one of the other women in there, we just were like, all right, let's make a podcast, something to do during the pandemic when you can't go anywhere and do anything. And it kind of started just as a way to help promote our female friends who are also entrepreneurs in business for themselves. But it's really like grown into so much more and interesting. My original co-host, life had her move in other directions. And there was actually a time when I was considering just dropping it and letting it go. And so many people were like, no, you can't do that. Like, it's great and it's needed. And the messages that come through are important. And so, luckily, another friend of mine, Graciela Valdez, stepped up and said, I will join you as your co host. And so yeah, I think I did about 100 episodes with Allison, and now we've done a little bit over 100 episodes with Graciela. And we've fine-tuned the message to being about authenticity and self-love. And one of the messages I always put out there is, if everybody just loved themselves, all of the problems in the world would go away. And I think one of the big steps towards getting to self love is authenticity. Because I think one of the reasons we struggle to love ourselves is because we are not being our true selves. And if we allowed ourselves to be who we truly were, it would be easy to love ourselves. But we're out there all the time, like trying to be who we're supposed to be, who we should be, doing what we're supposed to do and what we should do, instead of honoring what's true within ourselves. So, and it's like walking that path has also put me more on that path of finding who is my authentic self. And so, one of the things you mentioned was, we met when my capacity was as a physical therapist. And, you said, yes, I was a holistic physical therapist, but over the last couple years, really digging into what I do is so not physical therapy. And even there was one, and it's funny, I don't remember who was on my table, but I very clearly remember getting the message from my guides because it was based on some of the work that we were doing with the person on the table. even as a physical therapist, I did a lot of energy work, I did a lot of emotional work and other things. And this message came in like, you think that your job is to help people heal their physical pain and restore their function and mobility. They're like, that's just a piece of what you're doing. Your real job here is to help people like tap into their personal power and become the best version of themselves that they can be. And understanding that whatever physical pain or dysfunction that they were experiencing at the time, that's just a distraction from them becoming their best self. And like, how often do these pains show up just to keep us focused on something else instead of focusing on what we're really meant to be here and do? And it's just one of those things that helps keep us small, because if you're over here dealing with that back pain, you're going to not get to those big things that you're supposed to be doing. It reminds me a lot. I don't know if you've read, I think it's called The Big Leap. But he talks about upper limit problems, like we create all these issues that stop us from going higher, going further. We think that they're like, oh, that car accident just happened. Whereas in fact, like, you on an energetic level created that thing to happen so that you have an excuse for not doing the greater thing that you're meant here to do. And so in that moment, I realized like the label of physical therapist was also a limitation for me, always trying to fit in that box or find ways to explain how what I was doing fit inside that box, and realizing that it was creating limitations on my ability to truly help heal people, which isn't about healing the physical ailments, and um but healing the whole persona so that they can step into their higher self. And with saying that, I also want to clarify, like, I don't actually heal anybody. Only you can heal you. It's just sometimes we need help in that process, and I'm here to be the support, the guide to help you find your way on your journey, because I can't take it for you. That was a lot.
Unfortunately, right? Lots of us I know I've spent a whole lot of money trying to get somebody else to fix me. And the best healers are the ones that turn the mirror to face the patient so that they have the ability to see. And, the Buddha would teach according to the person's capacity in front of him at that time, until, later in his life when he realized he needed to put it all down on paper, whether we got it or not. Um, but it was a way called expedient means to be able to help someone walk a path that's heading in a particular direction. I like what you say about the car accident, because it's like I have this Mack truck theory. There's going to be somebody coming along and tapping you on the shoulder going, hey, you might want to pay attention to this. And if you don't, then it's like, the tap gets harder and harder until you just can't ignore it as hard as we try. Um, so I think that that's absolutely brilliant, both that you realized that it wasn't just about physical therapy, but also that it's not your job to fix someone. I can imagine that that's a huge trap to get caught in. How do you deal with that line between what's yours and what's theirs?
Well, and I think, looking back, I was a physical therapist for 32 years. And so just to clarify, I am not a physical therapist anymore. I don't hold a physical therapy license anymore. And, in the early days, like, if someone didn't get better, I felt like I wasn't doing my job properly. I failed if they didn't get better. And, that results in all of the searching for, I need to learn more things. I need to learn more skills. I need to get better at what I do. And I don't remember when the moment was, but somewhere along the way, I realized, oh, they don't want to get better. It doesn't matter what I do. I can be the best physical therapist in the world, but this person sitting in front of me right now doesn't actually want to get better. And once I had that realization, I started to see it in others. And, people will say, like, well, of course everybody wants to get better. And I don't know that there's anybody going to say, like, no, I don't want to get better. But on a subconscious level, there are many people that don't want to get better. And one arena that I saw this in very often was with the diagnosis of MS, multiple sclerosis. I had multiple patients that would come in wheelchair bound, and we're going through and doing therapy, and they're starting to walk again, and then they quit therapy. And part of it is I think, and I could be wrong on this, but like they've created this whole identity around, I have MS, I'm disabled, I'm in a wheelchair, and if I go and change that, then who am I anymore? They've created their whole life around being disabled. How do I possibly go back from that? I do know people who have, but it's taken a lot of, I'll say, more spiritual healing to get to that space. And, but not everybody is ready or has the capacity to go there. And it's okay. It used to frustrate me a lot. And then I also have to sit back and go, that's their journey. And if that's the journey they're on, like that's the journey they get to be on. And if they want to change that, they get to decide that too. But I can't make them do that. And so I always try and sit to be in the space of um, the possibility of their highest potential. And I had to learn to like let my ego go and not take any like um, guilt or shame or anything, like if I couldn't get them to level up. And because it's not on me, it's on them. So did I answer your question?
Absolutely. It's funny because there were a couple of points that I found fascinating. Last weekend I did an event in Jacksonville, and I was one of the presenters. And my friend who was hosting the event, he was talking about how his example was more like somebody going around and calling themselves shy. Well, I'm shy. I'm this. I'm that. And he's like, no, you're not. Just call yourself what it is. You're a scaredy cat. Like you're not willing to deal with it. But we don't want to hear it in that context. And so the ones who really wanted to create a breakthrough are the ones who are going to be able to hear what he's saying. And the ones who don't are just going to continue to call themselves shy, like it's just something I can't do anything about. And the other time I've heard a similar story, have you read the book The Reconnection?
It sounds familiar.
So his name is Eric. I can't remember his last name. He's a chiropractor, and he's been doing energy work with patients. The book was published a while ago, and he was talking about how this woman came in, and I don't remember if it was MS specifically, but it was something similar to what you're talking about. She and her husband came in. Her husband sat in the lobby. She went into the room. She got off the table. She was walking, and she went out into the lobby, and she was supposed to have another appointment the next day but missed it, and like a week or two later came back for the second session and was back in the wheelchair. And basically he shares in the book that the husband had been taking care of her but having an affair on the side because she had been disabled for so long, and that her ability to walk now interrupted their entire flow, and they had to admit or acknowledge all this stuff that neither one of them was willing to address. So, yes, we absolutely do nail our foots to the floor in just crazy ways. So, how do you develop, like as a coach? I know one of my challenges is giving people the space to be where they are without trying to force them. Because I think my results, your results are a reflection of my performance. How do you get yourself to stop? Are there practices that you participate in? Like, is it just help?
um I think part of it is just recognizing when you see it. And I also have fun little tools that I use to challenge someone. And for example, this week I have a client who's dealing with an issue that there were physical components of the problem that could be cleared out and got him to a certain level. And he came in this week and he's like, I feel like I'm 75% better. And I was like, that's great. And like through all the testing, like there wasn't really anything physically holding him back from being 100% better. And so we asked his body, I'm okay being 100% better. And the answer came back no. And so, yeah, then you go into clearing out what are the things that are stopping you from getting to be okay, healing all the way. And I'm not really gonna, it's gonna be different for everybody. The story is not going to be the same for everyone. But it's interesting once you start peeling away those layers of why you're not ready to get better. And some people will go there, and some people, it's like we'll get the answer no, but then the stuff that comes up also shows like, yeah, I'm not ready to dive into that either. And so like I was happy this person this week, they were like ready, and they were, we dove into some of what the issues were that was getting in the way. And other people, like, things just get guided in such a way, it's like, yep, they're not ready for that, and we just like clear out some fluffy stuff, but know that, if they keep going, and there are people that do persist. I mean, I have clients that, they get to different levels, and I commend them also because they don't give up. I think sometimes we have this we talked about like all the different trainings that, you and I both have gone through a lot of trainings, and like you hope that like, I'm going to go, I'm going to complete this training, and then my life is going to be completely turned into everything I want it to be. And is that possible? Maybe it's possible. It could happen, but it doesn't usually happen. It's like it takes you to the next level, and then you get comfortable with that level, and then when you're ready, you go to the next level. And so it's the same with some of my clients. It's like they come in like with all kinds of stuff, and then we do the easy stuff that gets them to the certain level. And some people go like, okay, that's all I'm interested in doing. But I have other ones that recognize like, oh, if I keep working at this, I can get to the next level, and then there's another level, and then there's another level. So it's just being there and being okay with what they want to do. You want a next level? I'm here to help you next level. And if you don't want to, I still love you.
I think that's really key because it sounds like there's a lot of giving people permission.
I think that's a lot of times what people are waiting for is someone to give them permission. And I think probably we learned that as children. We have to get permission from our parents to do everything.
Yep. Yeah. And that conditioning is so challenging to let go of. I remember a landmark forum leader looked at me. No, she was a seminar leader. A landmark seminar leader looked at me one time and said, "Erin, When you're finally ready to let go of that story, that's when you're really going to create the breakthroughs. I kept going back to the center and back to the center, and it's great and it's fluffy and it's a good space and it feels awesome. But then, like, you start to wonder, how come I'm not getting better? And it's, really, I can't fix the main concern if I'm not willing to work on the peripheral, because I can come to you and have you help my body get back in alignment. I can go to my chiropractor, I can go to my acupuncturist, I can go to any of these places that I go. But if I'm not willing to do the work of understanding acceptance and integration in between sessions, if I'm not doing the exercises, if I'm not doing the journaling, if I'm not doing the digging, then none of it's going to take, because muscle memory is just going to snap it right back to where it was.
That's true. Both on, and it happens on a physical layer and it happens on an emotional and mental layer. I laugh because people get pretty accustomed to, they come and see me, and oftentimes in one session, we can get rid of the pain. But that doesn't always happen because of programming. Our muscles, our bodies get programmed to function certain ways, just like our mind gets programmed to function certain ways. And I laugh sometimes when people, like, they have to come back for a second visit and they're like, why didn't I just stay fixed? And I'm like, well, you didn't just develop those conditions that created the pain in one day. So to expect that it's going to completely go away in one day is crazy. And these physical things are often amplified by the mental emotional things that are going on, and there can be all different other kinds of layers. Worked on ancestral work with people, cellular memory, which has been interesting, seeing what comes up for people and the stories that have been, we create our own stories, but sometimes these are stories that are carried from generation to generation to generation to generation through our cells. And, it's like, where did I get that story from? Well, it wasn't even from anything in this lifetime. Sometimes it's something from 4 generations ago that your family lived through, and you're still carrying it. And so, even something like that, like, you have to know it exists there to be able to clear it out. And finding those things, they're like little treasures that pop up and say, here I am, clear me out.
So that sounds, I mean, if I take a look at you're a practicing physical therapist, and now all of a sudden you're on this end where you're talking about layers and levels and spirit guides and all of that. Like, how did you get here from where you started?
Yeah, it's I was not raised in, people like to label this stuff woo woo. I was not raised in the woo. But things just happened along the way, and I happened to notice them. And I think one of the easiest things, starting out as a physical therapist, when I graduated, there was a hospital in town that I absolutely wanted to work at. And the position they offered me was in the acute neuro floor. And I'm like, that's like where all the, like, fragile people are and, like, the most difficult patients are. And why are they going to put me, a new grad, into that position? Like, this is completely not okay. And here I am on staff with, they had around 50 therapists, and, like, many of them had 10, 15, 20, 25 years of experience. And here I am coming in as a new grad. And very shortly after I started, like, patients would be asking for me to be their therapist. And I was just like, this makes no sense. Like, this other person who they could be working with has way more experience. They know way more what they're doing than I do. And I'd like to say I figured it out right away, but it really took me probably close to 4 or 5 years to realize that it wasn't just what I was doing with my patients, but there was energy involved. And once I had that aware, like that was when I got that, everything shifted. And then I started searching down that path and investigating more things and starting to realize, like, now I laugh at the question. People are like, are you working with energy? And I'm like, everybody's working with energy. We're working with energy right now, having this conversation here. It's just the matter of some people are doing it intentionally and some people are just doing it willy-nilly, completely unaware. And so when you actually put focus and an intention in it, it becomes even more powerful. I think it comes easier for some people, like myself, like it was happening and I didn't even know it. The simple example I use is like when you work in an inpatient facility, the patients get therapy typically 6 or 7 days a week. And therapists obviously don't work 6 or 7 days a week. So the people that are your patients during the week probably are going to be seen by somebody else on the weekend. So we'd have to write, like what this patient, what level they were at. So an example would be like, I would write down, Mr. Smith walks 200 feet with a wheeled walker with min assist. And then the weekend would go by and then I would run into the therapist that saw Mr. Smith on the weekend and they'd be like, are you nuts? He walked 10 feet with maximum assistance. And it was like, and then I'm going like, oh my God, did they have a stroke or something must have happened that they had degraded so much. But then I'd go see him and we'd be like, no, we'd walk 250 feet, and so like it didn't click right away, but when it finally did, I understood. It was like I wasn't just supporting them physically, I was energetically supporting them to have these shifts. And that was just the start of it. And like once you start to tune into the other dimensions, they just very actively present themselves. But you have to notice them and pay attention to them for them to show up. People all the time are, I talk about my spirit guides and people are like, I wish I had spirit guides that were communicating with me. I'm like, you do. You're just not listening to them. They're trying to get your attention, but and even like you do notice sometimes, and then you brush it off like, no, that can't be real. It is real, and pay attention to it. And then it will start to happen more often and it will become more clear and easy, and just go with it. And I also am open to the idea that it's all made up. It's completely in my head. And that's okay because life is way more fun this way. If it's not real, like the world without it is not fun.
It's one of those things where when I published the book Hate Your Way to Happiness, that's actually the way I decided to create that book. Was one day I was just depressed and pissed off and like done with everything, and I was screaming at God, just like, screw you, I want out, this is it, if you don't tell me what the hell I'm supposed to be doing, like, I'm gonna bounce, like, I'm done. And 10 days later, when I had a session with my coach, I was complaining about something. And she says, oh, why don't you just hate your way to happiness? And I went, wait, what? And it clicked, because it was exactly what I had asked for. It's not like, we get a burning bush and the voice of God comes, like through an intercom, and it's not going to be that obvious. And I love what you say, because it really is that obvious. A couple months ago, I had another episode where I was feeling a little bit lost, and I'm like, I don't get it. I keep watching all of these damn tarot videos and all this stuff, and it's like the message is the same over and over, and it's like, is this really for me? There are 3,000 people, 5,000 people, 10,000 people watching this. And the next tarot video I watch, she looks straight at the screen and she says, yes, I am talking to you. I was like, whoa. It's you will get the message that you need when you're asking for it. Let somebody, if it's like, it would be insane if you said, listen, I want the club sandwich, I'd like a Diet Coke, and maybe make the fries a little extra crispy, okay? And the waiter comes back and tries to give you the plate, and you're like, what's that? Like, this is what you asked for, lady. Like,
And I think that's important too, like getting clear on what you're asking for. Because I always laugh, one of my past employees, she had made out her list to the universe of what she wanted in a relationship. And her joke was always, I forgot to put one thing on my list. And that was that it was a man. Because she's like, I got this relationship that everything I asked for is on my list, but it's my dog. So when you're asking for what you want,
should be careful.
and be clear, because like she asked for all the things that she wanted, but she missed the one important piece, that it be a human. So her dog provided everything else on that list that she had asked for, but it was a dog.
Wow.
Because she assumed that the universe knew that
There
she
you
was
go.
asking for a man. And so sometimes if you're not getting what you're asking for, check what you're asking for, because you might not be truly specific about what it is.
Yes, this is absolutely true. And that leads us into an interesting point, because we were talking earlier about people not healing and not being willing or able to heal because of the past trauma and what is in their background. And very often, like, I know it's my experience, and a few people that I speak with have similar experiences, where I don't feel like I'm allowed to want what I want, or that what I want is okay or reasonable or allowed. It's too much. I'm being needy, or I'm being a little crazy. Like, how do you decide what you want? Like, if the why is supposed to be so important, how do I know I got the right one?
Well, and like that's interesting that you bring this up, because sometimes I have been in that space of, I don't even know what I want. And having to sit in that space and decide. um I think it's come, like that particular side of it has become more clear, getting to the realization of, you can have anything. You can have absolutely anything. Because I think before, my beliefs were such that, like, I can have certain things, but within certain limitations. And then once you realize, like, there are no limitations, that's when it starts to get crazy. Like, okay, if I could have anything, and it's still something that I'm working through, and I think it's something that will shift for all of us. Um, but when you're thinking about what you want, understand that you can have anything you want. And the judgments that we put on these things, because also me operating in a more spiritual realm here, somehow, like, we got this whole crazy thing that, like, to be spiritual, you have to be poverty stricken and not want for material things. And it's like, God wants you to have whatever you want. Like, your birthright is love and joy. And so you are open to having anything that brings you love and joy. And what is that for you? I don't know. I think it's a little bit overwhelming, I think, to have that realization that you can have anything you want. And the only thing that's getting in the way of you having that is you and all those limiting belief systems that you've created. Yeah. Dream big.
Well, then, of course, There, like, one of the things that I'm experiencing as I'm really beginning to, deepen my faith and start to, the word that I hate most of all, surrender. The more I really surrender and allow, the more I'm seeing how magical things could be. And then, of course, that dark side comes back and goes, look at how much time you've wasted. You could have had this all blah, blah, and it's like, then I start to go down that path and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is another one of those self sabotage moments. Like, going down that path is just more of the same. It's that ego, that dark side, the shadow self, trying to steer you back into that bullshit lane so that you can continue to suffer and struggle and not get what you want. And it's like, it's totally a trap.
Just messing with you, just seeing, and like, have you really done the growth work that you've done? And then you catch yourself and it's perfect. But also when you said that, it made me think of, so the other day I was out there exploring other podcasts to see like who's out there doing something similar to my podcast realm. And the crazy thing was, like, every podcast I found, like, the women on the show, they were in their late 20s or in their mid to early 30s. And I was like, who are they to be like giving this, this advice out to people? And then I had this aha moment. Like, I remember when I was starting to, I'll say, wake up, and I would talk with women that were in their 50s and 60s looking at me in my late 20s, and they would say to me, I wish I knew what you know when I was your age. I had this realization going into the collective consciousness that the reason these younger women know what they know at their age is because of all the work women in our age group did along the way. And so it's become part of the collective consciousness. And so all of this work that we have done, it hasn't just advanced us, it's advanced the whole. I go back to the 100th monkey, whether the story is true or not, but the fact that certain number of monkeys learn to wash their sweet potatoes and then they all know how to wash their sweet potatoes, like, there has to be something to the collective consciousness. And even like when I see 2-year-olds operating a cell phone, like, you don't just come out of the womb like and instantly know, but yes you do, because everybody knows how to operate a cell phone. So it's just part of human conditioning now. We know how to operate these little handheld devices. No, that you were talking about how that you go back and be like, I could have been so much further along. And no, you couldn't have, like, everything is just coming as it can. And acknowledge yourself for where you've arrived to instead of going, oh, I could have been further along. No, you are where you're supposed to be now. And congratulations for the work that you have done. And thank you, all the people coming behind you. Thank you for being the one that's gone ahead and led and done this work. That's something I tell my clients all the time on the table. Like, thank you for coming in and doing the work, because the healing work that you are doing not only helps heal you, it also helps heal your family, but it also helps heal humanity as a whole. And not everybody is out there doing the work. And so if you are doing the work, just so much sincere gratitude to you for doing that and helping all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Even if it feels lonely, even if you feel like you're the only one, because one of the things that I've noticed in my lifetime is with these trends where, you were talking about the 100th monkey. It's funny because I remember I was in my 20s when I was introduced to sushi, and it was not really a thing. There weren't sushi restaurants anywhere. And within a year or so of me being introduced to sushi, there were sushi restaurants everywhere. And it's kind of the same thing with a lot of the personal development circles, the spiritual dimensions. So many more people, like, God, there are so many tarot channels and crystal shops and things that just weren't, like, they were weird. They were around, but it was like, the hippie lady that nobody ever talked to had this one tiny little shop, and she had three clients, and it was a labor of love. Or the entire state shopped at her store, and now it's you throw a stick and you hit three. It's crazy because it's also kind of that same thing. Everybody's into crystals, everybody's into new age music and all of this other stuff. And it's not like people are going out and having conversations. Yeah, sure, somebody might say, oh, I started doing yoga and this, that, and the other, but it's almost like it just shows up out of nowhere. I think that that's really viable. It's like, the more, if I focus on the divisiveness and the separation and the negative energy, then that's what I'm contributing to. And if I'm focusing on forgiveness and love and compassion and awareness and presence, then that's really what's going to grow and expand. And very often it's like we don't even consciously know that we've been shifted just a little bit in that direction until all of a sudden things start to change.
What I also find interesting right now is people come in and they lay on my treatment table, and we get to talk about all these kinds of things. And so many people say, oh, like, I wish I could talk to this about this stuff with my friends and with other people out there. And I'm like, everybody is saying this, like, everybody wants to talk about this stuff, but people are still afraid to talk about it, and I'm not sure why. But that's part of creating, the podcast, that we can talk about these things and people can see, like, oh, I'm not the only one. And the other side of this too is creating community. And so besides just the one-on-one work that I do with people, I hold classes and workshops and retreats now to bring people actually physically together so that they can meet and talk and see that no, they aren't the only ones interested in talking about these kinds of things. And they're not the only ones interested in growing on a personal and a spiritual level. And like, the time is now. Like, it's time for us to all open up and feel free to talk about this stuff. Yeah, there are still some people out there that are living in the dark ages and aren't open to it. But in general, I feel like most people are. They just think that other people aren't. And so they keep it to themselves. And this is part of the reason, too, that I just like, there's that meme I see all the time on social media, like, let your weirdo light shine bright so that the other weirdos know how to find you. And but for me, it's also, okay, people can find me, all you weirdos come over here, but also to see that there are plenty of weirdos out there. You're not the only one. And it's time for us to be open and not have to, like, whisper in the corner about this kind of stuff or have secret meetings somewhere about this stuff. It's time for the witches to rise again, and you're not going to get burned at the stake anymore. um, it's not a death sentence now to share the light and be open about it.
Well, and I think what you point to is really fascinating because there is some truth to that. There is also that we exist in whatever pocket we create for ourselves because we're able to absorb so many different vibrations and so many different signals that are coming in. And what we choose to focus on dictates the direction. So it's like when somebody's on your table, if they're saying, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I found you. Um, and they don't feel like they have the courage to speak with the people around them. There is, we're socially wired and we're afraid that we're going to get kicked out of the tribe. We have access to so many different dimensions that we don't need to be stuck with a tribe that doesn't fit us. And whatever tribe you choose to be in, it's becoming more and more apparent that it is actually a choice. The whole like victim story really doesn't exist. One of the things that I spoke with the podcast that got released at the beginning of April is you become who you hang around. The energy that you choose to marinate in, that you choose to step into and soak in, is what is going to continue to show up. I remember when I did the Millionaire Mind Intensive an age ago, probably 2008. I remember one of the leaders was saying it's kind of like a crap magnet. And, like you've got this really strong pull of crap into your life. And just because you turn the magnet off doesn't mean the stream just stops. There's still some residual crap coming your way. And it's a practice of shifting and really observing. In Buddhism, I practice Nichiren Buddhism. We talk about how the environment is a reflection of the self, and it's a beautiful thing because if I want to know how I'm doing at healing and shifting and creating, all I have to do is look outside. And if outside still looks bad, and if I'm still like with those negative people who are complaining and bullying and abusing and really not seeing how I'm the one who's like hung out the open sign, open for business, come on. Like I'm here for that. If I until I recognize that, it's going to keep happening. And so it's not like every bully or mean person is just going to go away. I think one of the things I'm noticing is the internet connection. Probably when we were talking before, it was fine because there was nothing being uploaded. But then once the recording starts, we're talking and it's uploading.
Yeah, there was some kind of delay for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm noticing that.
So,
Yeah, it's cool. All right, great. So we have probably like 10 to 15 minutes left to complete an hour. If you want, like we can just kind of start the wrapping up process, or you can attach on to the last thought that you heard and then we'll go from there.
um,
Any thoughts?
I'm like, what was the last thought we
Doesn't
were
have to be
talking?
a full hour. I mean, well, I was talking about how in Buddhism, environment is a reflection of the self.
Oh,
And so the way that I can tell how successful I'm being at healing, at evolving, is entirely the reflection that's in front of me.
yeah. Um, I don't know that I have anything to add to that. Um, you expressed all of that beautifully, and
Okay.
I can't think of anything to add. So, if you want to start wrapping up, I'm okay with that.
Okay, cool. So then it is what it is. Everything is in the divine order. All right, awesome. So, Julietta, like, you know, everything is divinely ordained. It all goes exactly the way it needs to go. I really appreciate you sharing the space with me today. And I would just like to ask if there is something that you would like to leave our audience with, some piece of advice, something that you think they might like to focus on.
Well, and even
Take it
just
away.
based on what you just said, that everything is divinely guided. The thing I always say to myself in moments where it doesn't feel like things are moving in the right direction is that the universe conspires in my favor. And so, even that negative thing that's happening, that it doesn't feel good in that moment, give it a minute or a week or a month, and you will start to see why that thing happened. It was so that this better thing could come along. And it sometimes it seems a bit corny, and maybe you're just trying to sugarcoat things, but in my experience, like everything that I've ever thought was like, oh my God, this is just the worst thing that could have happened to me, down the road, I recognize and see why exactly that happened, because it brought me to exactly where I was supposed to be. And if that thing didn't happen, I wasn't going to be here now. And so, yes, crazy things get in the way and they just don't trip me up the way they used to, because I recognize, like, oh, this is just part of the process and everything is going to be perfect from here. And so the glitch that we had on the recording here was also meant to be so I would share this message, that if you're listening to this message is for you. I'm talking to you. And just wait to see what's to come with optimism and faith and trust. So,
Well said.
thank
Very,
you.
very well said. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today, Julietta. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I had no doubt that this would be a fun conversation, and I'm sure you and I could talk for hours and hours, but this is a good start for people.
I think we may need to have you back for sure. Okay. And
I'd be happy
also,
to anytime.
I want to thank you because you have definitely been a major, major contribution to the fact that this podcast is even functioning. So thank you for that.
I'm so happy that that I
All
had
right.
some level of inspiration in you doing this, because I know that your podcast is going to share so many wonderful messages for people out there. Thank you for doing what you do.
You're welcome. You definitely have seed here. All right, brilliant. So thank you for joining us. This has been The Secret of My Success. It is a space for us to explore what it means to live a fulfilling life. I am your host, Erin Curran. Thanks for joining us for another episode, and we'll see you next time.